In Excel, the term workbook and the term file mean the same thing. We are currently looking at a workbook called 01 Getting Started, and you see that name at the top of the screen. If you're working with a brand new workbook, you'll see a name like Book 1 or Book 2, perhaps, at the top of the screen. We use those terms, workbook and file, interchangeably as we work with Excel. Every workbook is comprised of at least one worksheet, and at the bottom of the screen we see a Sheet tab. Maybe 1, 2, 3, perhaps many. You can add sheets, you can delete sheets, you can change their name, you can move them left and right. Every worksheet has the same general characteristics. For example, as I use the mouse here to click on the sheet called 2013 Home Products Revenue, we see column letters across the top, row numbers down the left-hand side. A worksheet is comprised of columns and rows, and we never want to use the two terms interchangeably. Rows are horizontal, columns are vertical. If you use the mouse to click on a cell, you've selected the cell. You'll hear that term used from time to time. Let's select a cell. This is in column G, row 1, therefore it's called cell G1. And as you work with Excel, you do frequently need to refer to a cell by its location, that address as it sometimes is called. That's cell G7. Just above the column letters over on the left-hand side, you'll see an indicator as to what the current address is. And sometimes you'll hold down the left mouse button and highlight more than one cell. Still, within that highlighted selection, the cell that you began to do the dragging with is referred to as the active cell, and you see its address once again in the upper left-hand corner. Now, if I go to a different worksheet, typically we do this with the mouse. We can click another worksheet name at the bottom. This is for existing files where you already have data. We go to a different worksheet. This one has a chart in it. There's another worksheet down there called Profits. Let's click on this. Now, every one of these worksheets does have the same number of columns. And in this worksheet here, the active cell is at K1. If I start pushing the right arrow keys, and possibly we could do this by scrolling as well, after coming to the letter Z, the lettering scheme begins all over again with AA, AB, AC, and so on. And this continues for over 16,000 columns. If you happen to press Control right arrow, by the way, this will take you to the very last column, XFD, and that's over 16,000 columns. Getting back to the upper left-hand corner of any worksheet, Control Home. Nearly always this means go to cell A1. In some cases, there is an exception to that with frozen titles. As we move down the screen, pressing down arrow, we see the row numbers on the left-hand side, and eventually, if we kept doing this, and it would take a long, long time, we will reach the very bottom. I'm going to press Control down arrow here, and we're now well over 1 million rows. That number, by the way, is a power of 2. The underlying math here is all binary. We don't worry about that too much. Control Home will take us back to the upper left-hand corner. Every worksheet has the same number of columns and rows. And at different times, as you will see, we can easily adjust the width of the columns and the height of the rows as necessary. So, an Excel workbook comprised of one or more sheets. You can add sheets at any time, take them out. And the more you work with Excel, the more you will see that from time to time it will make sense to have multiple worksheets within the same workbook.